She packed her bags on a Tuesday morning in March, and nobody in that small town thought she would actually leave. The screen door slammed behind her with a sound that echoed across the empty driveway, and Margaret didn't look back. 43 years of marriage, and she was walking away from it all because of a piece of land that her husband had just inherited from his uncle. A piece of land that nobody wanted. A piece of land that everyone in the county said was worthless. But Margaret knew something that the rest of the town didn't know. She had overheard a conversation 3 weeks earlier, late at night, when her husband Thomas was on the phone with a lawyer. The lawyer had mentioned something about the property, something about what might be underneath it. And when Thomas hung up the phone, he had gone very quiet. He had walked out to the barn and stayed there until sunrise. Margaret had watched him from the kitchen window, and she knew that whatever was buried under that old farm had changed everything. Thomas was a good man. He was the kind of man who fixed things, who worked with his hands, who believed in doing right by people. He had spent his entire life as a carpenter, building homes for families across 3 counties. His hands were calloused and scarred from decades of honest work. He had never been rich. He had never wanted to be rich. But he had always been respected. People trusted him. People knew that if Thomas said he would do something, it would be done right. The farm had belonged to his uncle Robert, a man Thomas barely knew. Robert had moved away 50 years earlier, back when Thomas was just a boy. They had exchanged Christmas cards for a few years, and then even that stopped. When Robert died at 92, living alone in a small apartment in another state, the lawyers tracked down Thomas as his only living relative. The farm was his now. 40 acres of overgrown land, a collapsing barn, a house that hadn't been lived in for decades, and according to the property records, a mineral rights agreement from 1952 that nobody had paid attention to in all those years. That was when everything started to change. That was when Margaret began to understand that her husband was keeping something from her. Thomas started spending his evenings on the computer, something he had never done before. He started making phone calls in the barn, speaking in low voices. He started driving out to the property alone, sometimes staying there for hours. And when Margaret asked him what he was doing, he would just say that he was thinking about what to do with the land. He would say that he needed time to figure things out. But Margaret knew her husband. She knew that look in his eyes. She knew that he was wrestling with something much bigger than deciding whether to sell a piece of property. And when she finally confronted him, when she finally demanded to know what was really going on, Thomas had told her the truth. The mineral rights agreement from 1952 had never been properly registered. The company that had originally signed that agreement had gone bankrupt decades ago. And according to the lawyer, there was a possibility that there were valuable minerals underneath that land. Copper, maybe, or rare earth elements. The geological surveys from the 1950s had suggested there might be something worth money. But here was the problem. If Thomas tried to claim those mineral rights, if he tried to develop that land, he would have to deal with the current mineral rights holder, a large corporation that had bought up the rights decades ago. That corporation had done nothing with the land. They had simply held the rights, waiting for the day when it might become valuable. And now, with the price of certain minerals rising, they were starting to pay attention. They had already sent a representative to the county to start asking questions about the old farm. Thomas had a choice. He could sell the land to the corporation for a fraction of what it might be worth. He could hire a lawyer and fight for the mineral rights, which would cost him tens of thousands of dollars and might take years. Or he could do something else entirely, something that nobody would expect. Something that would require him to keep a secret from everyone, including his wife. That was why Margaret had packed her bags. Because when she finally understood what Thomas was planning to do, she couldn't be part of it. She couldn't watch him do it. She couldn't be complicit in what she believed was wrong. So she had left. She had gone to stay with her sister in the next county, and she had told Thomas that she would not come back until he had made a decision about what was right. Thomas was alone now, and the weight of that solitude was crushing him. He had spent his entire life doing things the right way, following the rules, being honest with people. But now he was facing a situation where doing things the right way might mean losing everything. The farm was worth maybe $50,000 as it stood. But if there really were valuable minerals underneath it, it could be worth millions. And if he didn't act quickly, if he didn't figure out a way to claim those rights before the corporation realized what was happening, he would lose the opportunity forever. He started spending his days at the property, walking the land, studying the old geological surveys, trying to understand what was really underneath the soil. He hired a private geologist, paying cash so there would be no paper trail. The geologist confirmed what the old surveys had suggested. There was copper down there. Not a massive amount, but enough to be worth something. Maybe a few $1 million worth if it could be extracted properly, but extracting it would require permits. It would require environmental assessments. It would require dealing with the corporation that held the mineral rights. And it would require money that Thomas didn't have. He was 62 years old. He had a pension from his carpentry work, but it wasn't much. He had some savings, but not enough to fight a legal battle against a large corporation. So Thomas did something that surprised everyone who knew him. He started taking on extra work. He started bidding on jobs that he normally would have turned down. He started working 6 days a week, sometimes 7. He was building additions on houses, renovating old barns, doing restoration work on historic buildings. He was working himself to exhaustion, and he was saving every penny. Margaret watched this from a distance. Her sister kept her informed about what Thomas was doing. And slowly, Margaret began to understand that her husband wasn't trying to cheat anyone. He wasn't trying to steal mineral rights or defraud the corporation. He was trying to do something much more complicated. He was trying to find a way to do what was right, while also protecting his own interests. 6 months passed, then a year. Thomas had saved nearly $200,000. He had also been studying the mineral rights agreement very carefully, reading every word, understanding every clause, and he had discovered something that the lawyers had missed. The original agreement from 1952 had a clause that said the mineral rights would revert to the landowner if the rights holder failed to conduct any mining operations or exploration activities for a period of 20 consecutive years. The corporation had done nothing with the land for more than 50 years. According to the terms of the original agreement, the mineral rights should have reverted to the landowner decades ago. Thomas hired a lawyer, a good one, and he showed her what he had found. The lawyer read the agreement carefully, and then she looked up at Thomas with an expression of cautious optimism. She said that he might have a case. She said that the corporation might not even realize that they had lost the mineral rights. She said that if they could prove that the corporation had done nothing with the land for more than 20 years, they might be able to claim the rights back. But it would be expensive. It would take time. It would require going to court. And there was no guarantee of winning. The corporation had resources that Thomas didn't have. They had teams of lawyers. They had money to spend on litigation. Thomas had his savings and his determination. He decided to do it anyway. He filed the paperwork. He hired the lawyer. And he waited to see what would happen. The corporation's response came quickly. They sent a letter saying that they had no intention of giving up the mineral rights. They said that the agreement was still valid, that they had conducted exploration activities on the land in the past, and that they had every intention of developing the property in the future. They threatened to sue Thomas for harassment and for attempting to interfere with their property rights. Thomas's lawyer told him that the corporation was bluffing. She said that if they had really conducted exploration activities, there would be records of it. She said that the corporation was probably hoping that Thomas would get scared and back down. She said that they should call the corporation's bluff and take the case to court. But taking it to court would cost money. It would cost a lot of money. Thomas would have to pay his lawyer's fees, expert witnesses, court costs, and all the other expenses that come with litigation. His savings would be depleted. He might lose everything, and he still might not win. That was when Margaret came home. She had been away for 14 months, and she had spent that time thinking about what her husband was trying to do. She had talked to her sister. She had talked to her pastor. She had prayed about it, and she had come to understand that Thomas wasn't trying to do anything wrong. He was trying to do something right, even though it was difficult and uncertain. She walked into the house on a Friday evening in May, and Thomas was sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by legal documents and financial statements. He looked up at her, and his eyes were filled with exhaustion and doubt. She sat down across from him, and she took his hand. She said, "I'm sorry I left. I was wrong to leave. You're doing the right thing, and I'm going to help you do it." Thomas started to cry. He said, "I don't know if I can win this. I don't know if I have enough money. I don't know if the lawyer is right about the agreement." Margaret said, "Then we'll figure it out together. We'll sell the house if we have to. We'll do whatever it takes, because you're right, and they're wrong, and that matters." The case went to court in the fall. It took 3 months of testimony, expert witnesses, and legal arguments. The corporation brought in their own lawyers, their own experts, their own evidence. They argued that they had conducted exploration activities on the land, that they had maintained the mineral rights in good faith, and that Thomas had no legal standing to challenge their ownership. But Thomas's lawyer was brilliant. She systematically went through the corporation's claims and showed that they were false. She showed that there were no records of any exploration activities on the land in the past 50 years. She showed that the corporation had simply held the rights, waiting for the day when they might become valuable. She showed that according to the terms of the original agreement, the mineral rights should have reverted to the landowner decades ago. The judge ruled in Thomas's favor. The mineral rights reverted to Thomas. The corporation appealed, but the appeals court upheld the original decision. After 2 years of litigation, Thomas owned the mineral rights to his land. But here was the thing that nobody expected. Thomas didn't try to develop the land. He didn't try to extract the copper. He didn't try to sell the mineral rights to another company. Instead, he did something that shocked everyone in the county. He donated the mineral rights to a conservation trust. He said that he didn't want the land to be mined. He said that he wanted it to remain as it was. A piece of open land where people could hunt and fish and walk and remember what the land looked like before it was developed. People asked him why he had fought so hard for something that he didn't intend to use. Thomas said that it wasn't about the minerals. It was about the principle. It was about standing up to a large corporation that had tried to take advantage of him. It was about proving that an ordinary person, with determination and honesty, could win against the odds. It was about leaving something behind for the next generation that was worth more than money. Margaret stood beside him when he made the announcement. She was proud of her husband. She was proud of the man he had always been, and she was proud of the man he had become through this struggle. They had lost money on the litigation. They had spent years fighting a legal battle. But they had won something more valuable than minerals. They had won their integrity back. They had proven that doing the right thing was possible, even when it was hard. The farm became a nature preserve. Local schools brought students there to learn about the land and the ecosystem. Hunters and fishermen used it responsibly, and Thomas and Margaret spent their retirement years walking that land, remembering the struggle and knowing that they had done the right thing. If you're watching this from somewhere in America, from a small town or a big city, from a farm or a suburb, I want you to know that there are still people like Thomas and Margaret in this world. There are still people who will fight for what's right, even when it costs them. There are still people who will choose integrity over money. There are still people who believe that doing the right thing matters more than winning. Tell us where you're watching from. Tell us about a time when you had to choose between what was easy and what was right. Tell us about someone in your life who has shown you what real integrity looks like. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of someone you love or something you believe in, please give it a like and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because stories like this, they remind us that we are capable of more than we think, that our choices matter, and that sometimes the greatest victories are the ones that nobody else can see.